episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
A verdict has been reached in the case of the United States government versus Sean Diddy Combs, and it is a mixed verdict. What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is a show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. Took 8 weeks, including deliberations, and the jury in the case of Sean Diddy Combs has now spoken. The hip-hop titan, who was once worth nearly $1 billion, has been found guilty of 2 felony counts, including transportation to engage in prostitution under the Federal Mann Act. But in a very dramatic twist, the same jury acquitting the hip-hop star of the most explosive and serious charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, which some believe this means this is a win for the defense and a loss for the government. Again, a mixed verdict. Sean Diddy Combs acquitted on the 2 most serious charges, the RICO charges, the racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. Let's bring in Tim Jansen here, who is Old Faithful. Tim Jansen, obviously the famed, for those who do not know, famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor. Tim, is this a loss for the government?
Yeah, this is a major loss for the government. Overcharge, spent a lot of money. They had a bad jurisdiction. They didn't have the evidence for the charges. And, you know, it's funny. I think that lawyer in L.A. predicted this last night.
Crazy, right? I'm going to pull that up.
And he exactly predicted it. So I don't know if he's that smart or if he had inside information or he was hearing what the jury was doing. I did tell you, once that modified Allen charge was read, they usually come back with a verdict, and they came back with a verdict pretty quickly. So it doesn't surprise me. The Mann Act violations are probably the least, the minimal up to 10 years, considerably less than the RICO or the sex trafficking, and he might be released on bond.
That's unbelievable. So we're going to get to that in a minute, but this is the tweet that Tim is talking about. This is one of our best guests, Nima Rahmani, who graduated from UCLA as a LA attorney. He reps a lot of celebrities. He also goes up against a lot of celebrities. Graduated UCLA at 19, Harvard Law at 22. And last night, 17 hours ago, he tweeted, Tim, here's my guess on the partial verdict in the Diddy trial. Count 1, racketeering. He put a question mark. We now know that's a not guilty. Count 2, sex trafficking of Cassie. Not guilty. We know that's true. Count 3, prostitution. Guilty. That's correct, I think. Count 4, sex trafficking. Jane. Not guilty. Count 5, prostitution. Guilty. I think you hit the nail on the head, Tim. That's kind of crazy.
That is. It is really crazy. He either watched the entire trial,
I
felt
think
comfortable that he knew what they were, or he had inside information.
Yeah. Nico, you able to hear us?
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Great. Great to have you back. For those who do not know, Nico LaHood is a former district attorney in Bexar County, Texas, which is San Antonio. And I think he might be getting a call at the moment. But Nico, to you, this is a mixed verdict. Not guilty. Acquitted on the sex trafficking and RICO conspiracy charges, the 2 most serious charges here. What do you make of this?
Well, I think Tim's spot on. It's a victory. I mean, when you're going into a trial with this much exposure, you identify what a win is. And this is definitely a win. I mean, I don't know if they thought they were going to get out unscathed completely. I think that, of course, you try for that. You have a plan for that. You have a strategy for that. But I think Tim nailed it. I mean, this was a win overall because you bettered your position. I mean, many times when you have a client that's facing 25 to life here in Texas, if they're considered a habitual, and you come back with a verdict of 10 or 12 years, that's a victory. You're facing life. You won. You beat the offer. You beat the exposure. And so I think this is a win for the defense.
Yeah. Tim, walk us through next steps now. This just happened. Obviously, this is in a federal courthouse, Lower Manhattan. Verdict comes in, mixed verdict. For those who are just joining, Sean Diddy Combs acquitted on the two most serious charges, the racketeering RICO conspiracy and the sex trafficking, and found guilty on some of the lesser charges. What happens now, Tim?
Well, his lawyers are going to ask for him to be released pending sentencing, and he has a lot better chance of getting released now with these charges. I imagine his guidelines might only be 2 years or less, and the judge might give him time served. But the question is if they're going to release him on his own, they're going to release him prior to sentencing. He doesn't have a lot of ties to Manhattan. He has a home in Hawaii he wants to put up for bond. But I think the defense has a good argument to release him with a big bond, knowing that the max he can get is 10 years.
Yeah, let me just give you guys, because this is breaking right now, and there's going to be all kinds of news. And by the way, Brian Koberger is in court at 1 Eastern. We're bringing that to you live. That's a little bit 2 hours and 20 minutes away, but we're going to talk about this for a while. And then tonight, STS Nation, an amazing treat for you. We've got Dr. Ann Burgess coming on this evening, and I'll mention this again, along with Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who was Brian Koberger's professor. She has never spoken about this until last night. She spoke briefly with News Nation, but she's coming on our show with Ann Burgess for a full discussion on this tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So kudos to Steve Cohen for putting this together. And there you go. Tim, back to you on this, and I'll get Nico's reaction. Mark Agnifilo, he is currently, as we speak, he is arguing for Sean Combs to be released today. Here's the quote. He should be released on appropriate conditions. He should be able to return to his home. Agnifilo said Combs would be willing to put up $1 million cash bond that is co-signed by 3 financially reasonable people. Sean Combs nodded his head as the argument was being made. He's been acquitted of very serious charges. Agnifilo said, it is my proposal he be permitted to walk out of the courtroom. So what does the judge have to weigh here, Tim?
Well, he's got to weigh risk of flight, and he's got to weigh in his own mind what he's going to do sentencing-wise, knowing all the facts and things he has seen. Now, the jury is the trier of facts. The judge ultimately determines the sentence. And the judge could incorporate in his sentencing guidelines relevant conduct, the conduct for which he was acquitted, the sex trafficking, and the court can consider that in his sentencing. So while it may be a Mann Act, you get a lower sentence, the judge could go above the guidelines and give him the maximum 10.
Yeah, Tim, for most of us are not attorneys, so just explain what the Mann Act is, please.
That's just hiring someone to go across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. And you have to have an interstate nexus of going across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. They clearly proved that in this case. The jury found it in this case. I think the jury was
Ooh, Tim froze up there. So
felon.
Okay.
I think he has to register as a sex offender. I think that's right. He'll have to register as a sex offender. In Florida, he would.
Yeah, in Florida. Okay. I assume in New York would be the same thing. Nico, there's already discussion. We're seeing the conversation here. We saw it recently. Some would argue in the Karen Reed trial, but certainly today, where a lot of money was spent. Are there 2 tiers of justice in this country for those with a lot of wealth and those who are, let's say, indigent or barely getting by?
I think the 2 tiers of justice can be argued that if you can afford competent representation, then you get it. I mean, no disrespect to our colleagues that do court-appointed work, but there's a difference typically in you know in representing somebody if you're retained and versus your court-appointed. You've seen that, so it's just something to consider. There's not a two tiers of justice, but you're going to be treated differently. Matter of fact, I think that Diddy was overcharged. I mean, I think this is an example of being overcharged where the government got too aggressive because they wanted to make example because he was a high-profile person. So sometimes the two tiers of justice goes against you, and it backfired in their favor. You gotta bring the case to a jury that you think you can prove. To indict someone is easier than to convict them beyond a reasonable doubt. And so just because the government can indict you doesn't mean that they can convict you. So I think this is an example of overcharging. So the two tiers of justice is just in being able to afford competent representation, in my opinion.
Yeah. Tim, let's talk about Cassie Ventura for a minute. Jane, who testified, the victim, and Mia, the former assistant. A lot of people are feeling sick over this. You see a comment right here. Absolutely sickening. We all saw Cassie being beaten. I guess from a legal perspective, what does this say? But also, more importantly, from a humanity perspective, Tim, what does it say that this guy is on camera beating this woman? There's sex videos that they watch where, you know, explicit things were going on, which is not a crime. To have sex on video is not a crime, but apparently we didn't see what the videos were. But what does it say, bigger picture, both legally and society wise, that this guy just got off essentially on the
Well, I think there is two tiers justice, because anyone else in America with that video in the hotel would have been charged with battery on a person, domestic battery, felony battery, great bodily harm, possibly. There is no excuse why he was not charged when that was released. And the district attorney, whoever it was, decided not to charge him, should resign from office immediately. There was clear-cut battery harm. And you know what happens when that happens? People get away with things. They feel invincible. They can do anything. And it looks like he just continued doing what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it. And now the government, bring these witnesses in. You say you're going to be safe, you're going to be okay. He's going to be gone for a long time. And now these people come out, expose themselves, expose their families to these trials, these accusations. And now he gets a lesser charge. And now they feel vulnerable, and it really kills the whole system. People don't want to come forward. It's like what we had many years ago, decades ago, in rape allegations. Women would not come forward because they weren't being taken serious. And so people were getting away with violent crimes against women. And it's disheartening. We didn't see all the evidence. I didn't see the videos, but clearly the government should have been a little more controlled in their charging, a little more control of their witnesses. I know they lost a witness or a couple of witnesses that didn't testify, but this was really bad loss for the government and for the people.
And what Tim is talking about, Joel, he's talking about this difference in state charges versus federal charges. So, I mean, I know that when I was DA here in Bexar County, that we worked with federal agents and federal prosecutors often, and we made decisions. I'm not saying this happened here, so I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying Tim's right. I mean, when you look at that video, and I think everybody's seen that video, that is definitely a domestic violence. That would be family violence assault here in Texas. Believe it or not, that'd be a Class A misdemeanor unless the allegation was restricting the airflow, then it raised to. And then if there was a weapon used, it would be aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. If there was serious bodily injury, it would be aggravated assault, SBI, serious bodily injury. But those would be state charges. But Tim's right. There's no objective reason why he shouldn't have been charged on the state side, unless there was some communication and that was going to be used in punishment in some federal situation. And if the statute hasn't run, which I'm not sure, I haven't looked at the date, he can still be charged now.
Interesting. We can dig back into that. I can see the COE is working to get us some live shots outside the federal courthouse. I'm sure the defense is going to speak. I don't know if the prosecution is going to come out and talk. But again, if you're just joining us, a mixed verdict reached in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. He has been acquitted on the two most serious charges: racketeering, conspiracy, and the sex trafficking charges. He has been acquitted on those and found guilty on the lesser charges to engage in prostitution. So kind of a, even though it's a news cliche, it holds true here, a bombshell. Sean Diddy Combs, still a convicted felon now, but facing much less serious time, I think, as a result of this. But Tim, one of the questions was, since this is a high-profile case, is the judge going to throw the book at him? Does the judge even have that discretion, or does the judge have to go with whatever the federal guidelines tell him here?
The judge has all 100% discretion in sentencing in federal court. The guidelines are advisory only. And the judge sat through this trial for 8 weeks. He saw the conduct. He saw the video. He can use that in determining a sentence. That's relevant conduct. I mean, people don't understand. You can be acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering, and that court can still say, I still find it relevant conduct to what you were doing on these charges, and I'm going to sentence you to the max. And since you were sentenced, I'm going to sentence you consecutive sentence on count 3 on count 5. So, the judge has full discretion. My clients never understand how can they use what was acquitted or dropped or not even charged. Because they want the judge to get a full picture of what this person was doing and sentence him accordingly, not just what the jury came back.
Yeah.
Now, they can't do more than 10. I don't know if he could do consecutive, but certainly he can give him 10 years in prison. And if judge is thinking about giving him 10 years, he probably will not give him bond. That'd be a big question, whether the court gives him bond today.
He can't stack them, Tim?
He might be able, they do groupings a lot for guideline purposes, but because they're separate convictions and separate individuals, he might be able to run them consecutive.
That's interesting. Nico, forgive me because I'm doing 75 things at one time.
Sure.
But were you saying here that this is Sherry's question? Can they charge him with battery either at a state or federal level now, since he wasn't charged in the first trial? I guess there's no, double jeopardy.
That's not double jeopardy. No. On the state side, they can if the statute of limitations hasn't run. So I don't recall when the video of that assault what happened and then where we're at. So if they're within the statute of limitation, he can be charged on the state side. Yes.
Wow. So Tim, we're getting a little more information from inside the courtroom, and Mark Agnafilo, he is making the plea to the judge to allow Sean Diddy Combs out on a $1 million cash bond. And he went on, and I quote here from Mark Agnafilo, he has been acquitted of very serious charges. He says, it's my proposal to be permitted to walk out of the courtroom. I am not saying this is not a serious crime. It is a crime of a vastly different nature, he said. I believe what a significant change in conditions, I believe that a significant change in conditions is warranted. He went on to say, Sean Combs's plane is currently in Hawaii and he does not have access to it. Maureen Comey, the lead government prosecutor here, who happens to be the daughter of Jim Comey, the former FBI director, said the government opposes releasing Sean Combs on bond, that he has committed a litany of crimes while incarcerated. That's interesting. And shows Yeah, that's what she says here. A litany of crimes while incarcerated, she says, and shows no respect for the law. There is no reason to believe he would do anything different if he's released now. She said, arguing that he does pose a danger and will flee from justice. What do you do if you're the judge here?
Well, I think the judge saw the arson. He saw the car being burned by someone. I think Mark is doing his best. But no, Mark, you walk out of the courtroom when the jury says you're not guilty. That's when you walk out the front steps, not when you were convicted of lesser charges that face a penalty up to 10 years. So he's making an argument that's not completely reasonable. I think the government has a reason to keep him in. And I think the judge who heard all the evidence is going to consider that for bond purposes. I mean, you look at the conduct he had when people disagreed with him, and that judge has to consider the people who testified against this person, knowing his propensity for violence.
Yeah, what
You know,
I mean,
what
Tim, what about that? I mean, there are people, including Cassie, Jane,
right.
including former there was a bodyguard, a former Diddy bodyguard last night, and forgive me, I can't remember his name. He said that I will be Diddy's public enemy number one. If he gets acquitted, he's coming after me. To the
That's
point
right.
that this guy said he would leave the country. So what about that? How do you protect these people?
I think the judge has a difficult position here. But federal judges, and I don't know this judge how experienced he is. If he's an experienced judge, he's going to do the right thing. I don't think he's going to release him because I think he's going to tell them, listen, this is not a misdemeanor that he was convicted in. He was charged, and I've heard the evidence in this case, and I think this community is safer, and I think he will show up for sentencing for sure if he's in custody. Those are the two factors he has to consider. And I take my job serious to protect this community, and no one can predict what I'm going to sentence him to, so I'm going to deny bond at this time.
Yeah. Spacey, I see you working on that shot outside the courthouse. If you guys are okay with it, Spacey, that's a you and COE decision. If we're allowed to bring it up with no volume until the lawyers come, 10:38 a.m. here. After the judge leaves the courtroom from the gallery, a loud clapping and cheering as Sean Combs.
So the Combs family is leaving the courtroom right now.
Okay.
Smiling and waving.
COE, can we bring that up without? Yeah. Let's take a look at this, guys. These are live shots right now of Sean Diddy Combs. Shout out to the COE in space for getting these pictures. This is the front entrance to the lower. Leave that up, please, without sound, unless you guys think it's going to be a problem. But doesn't look like they're stopping to speak to the media. Now, if you walk out those front doors and you go to the left, and you go kind of to the left and around the building, that is where the witnesses would come out of. That is where Mark Agnifilo and Maureen Comey come out of. Let's listen into this for a second if we can. Although she's not even speaking at this point, but let's try to listen in.
She's speaking. I don't know if we can hear her.
Yeah.
Is that a reporter?
Yeah, that's a reporter. Just trying to see if we have all. You can see now. You see that black van there. That is the van, and people are going to be celebrating here because there were a lot of Diddy fans. And that just leads me back to what I asked Nico last night about potential jury nullification, but not that car, the big van, the Sprinter van behind it.
Yep.
COE in space. If we have audio on this, can we take it?
Well, the family's leaving, so I don't think they're waiting for.
Okay, guys, let's listen to this one.
I think at the beginning of the trial, they said this is a man who's dynamic. He inspires people. He's a music mogul. He's touched every life of the people who have worked for him. But there is also a second side of Sean Combs that you don't know, and that was initially in the prosecution's opening arguments. So to say that, you know, I wouldn't speak on contrition. I don't think that's the word. But you see a man who has been praying, and you see a man who feels like his prayers have been answered.
Job of painting every second from when the jury walked in the room to when those charges were read to when they're discussing about maybe possibly releasing Sean Combs from jail today. So you were at the point right there where the lawyers were at each other, kind of looking at each other in that argument. Did you feel like one side had a stronger argument standing there?
This is local ABC News.
Again, not a legal analyst, but Judge Arun Submarine asked Mark Agnifilo, what does that look like? Does he walk out of court today? And he said, in the world, according to Mark Agnifilo, actually, yes. And we would, you know, obviously there's some paperwork that needs to be filed. We need to go through some legal proceedings, but absolutely, yes, this is a day where we think he should walk out of this courtroom. And so then Judge Submarine asked Combs, I can imagine, Mr. Combs, you don't want to go back to NBC. And he started shaking shaking his head no like that. And he's been known to kind of communicate with the judge like that. There was a little bit of laughter in the courtroom when he was just like, no way, I don't want to go back into the courtroom. I also want to share this with you. I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo after the legal wrangling back and forth, because what is now going to happen, both sides have to submit a letter to the court why they believe he deserves to be released on bail today, why they believe he should still be held in custody. Mark Agnifilo is asking for a $1 million bond with 3 family members who are in court today. So they have resolved to get it done today. So court is still not dismissed. We still have to return to the court at 1 o'clock this afternoon to determine or to learn whether or not this bail application will be approved or not. And if he does, in fact, walk out of the front doors today. But I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo. He was asked by one reporter, how do you feel? He says, I've never had this feeling in 34 years. And so then I asked him, well, what does that feeling feel like? And he kind of thought about it. And he says, I'm relieved that I'm not miserable. And so that was one perspective from Mark Agnifilo. The other part of that is Doug Rigdor. He's seated directly in front of me in the courthouse. He's been here every single day of the deliberations. He's
Cassie's attorney.
Cassie Ventura. He's the one who filed that November 2023 bombshell lawsuit that really spurred this investigative, this federal investigation into action. And as they read the verdict, he just sat on his phone with his head down. He didn't flinch. He didn't look. This is obviously not the verdict, not guilty on sex trafficking for his client, Cassie Ventura. Speaking to him privately over the last few days in jury deliberations, he was disappointed in some of the arguments he heard coming from the defense during closing arguments. He said, Cassie liked to have sex. That's interesting. A modern day love story. That's interesting. So he was really disturbed by some of the closing arguments that Mark Agnifilo gave on behalf of Sean Combs, which ultimately ended up being convincing for this jury that acquitted him on the 2 sex trafficking charges, the one for Cassie Ventura and the one for Jane.
Inside. Thank you to Darla Miles that she was inside court.
All right, let's mute that. Tim will be back in a sec. When we get, it looks like you see a podium set up there with microphones in classic New York style. That will be hounding them once they get out. Please leave that picture up, COE, if you think we can, and ask Space Coast if that's okay to do. You see the U.S. Marshals, that's security right there. And that obviously is local news. But Tim, what do you make of what we just heard from this reporter, that Mark Agnifilo, and by the way, they're coming back at 1 p.m. With his bail application. So Tim, just what do you make of Mark Agnifilo saying that he never felt this way in 34 years? And then she said something along the fact that he said, I don't feel miserable or something.
Well, I had that feeling in our RICO trial. We worked so hard to win the RICO, which we did win, but then he was convicted on some bribery and some false statements. So we were pleased 100% that we didn't lose the RICO, because that meant 15 years in prison. But we were still not happy he was convicted on the other charges. But, it's a mixed feeling. I'm sure if he gets released on bond, I think Mark will probably get a big bonus from Sean. If he gets a decent sentence, he'll get a big bonus. And Mark is probably feeling like he didn't blow the biggest case in the world, and that his career will not be tarred by a bad verdict. It'll be always seen as a victory for Mark. So it's a great day for Mark. It's a Super Bowl win for Mark, and it's a career win.
Yeah. Too bad Diddy's such a horrible human being, but Mark Agnifilo is actually a nice guy. So you split the difference. But Poetic Justice says he'll be shunned by all decent people. He'll be like OJ, but with baby oil. But Nico, I'm not sure about that. I know you're a former DA, but let me ask you. I mean, I don't know. He might get some, potentially street cred. I don't know. He has a lot of fans. How do you think he's going to be perceived after this?
It's hard to say, but it's not like he'd get street cred if it was more of a violent man-on-man kind of gang stuff. I mean, when you're up women and doing the stuff that he's alleged to have done and been convicted of certain portions of it, I don't know if you get street cred for that, because even in the world of the underground world, that this kind of behavior is shunned upon overall. But I agree with Tim about about the assessment of the lawyer. I mean, obviously you feel great when you win completely, but I think you have to go into a case like this with a layered expectation of what a win is. You define what a win is, and this is a win. There's no doubt about that. I mean, this is a big deal for his career. Obviously, it's a better situation for Diddy, for Sean, and then it's obviously not good for the prosecution or for the complainants in the case and the victims. So, I mean, it is a mixed bag, but I'm sure he's had big wins where he's felt elated walking out of a courtroom. God willing, all of us have as litigators, warriors in the courtroom, whether you're a prosecutor or a defense attorney. You hope that in your career you can walk out with wonderful feelings because the right thing happened.
Yeah. Tim, this is what everyone wants. I mean, everyone, I know you can't give it to us, but give as close as you can. Can you give us a range of the time that he is likely to get? The government is asking for 20 years. Do you think he actually gets that? Will there be time served? And also factoring in, good behavior. How much time is Sean Diddy going to actually be behind bars for this?
Well, I was curious when the prosecutor made the arguments that he was committing crimes while he was in custody, because the court can consider that also in determining a sentencing. What's going to happen after today? First, they're going to do the bond. Then they're going to do what's called a pre-sentence investigation. It's a report done by probation, which is an arm of the court, independent of the court. And they go with background, history, medical, mental, education. And they'll do a full guideline application, give you everything about the guy. The court will get that. Both parties can do sentencing memorandums. The prosecution will probably seek 20 years based on the relevant conduct and all the, and I think the judge might give him somewhere between 5 and 10. I think his guidelines will probably be around 36 months. They'll probably group them, but the statutory maximum would be 20. So the judge can go anywhere from probably 3 years to, there's going to be a guideline range for sure. And he might, with no prior history, his guidelines would probably be low. So it could be 18 to 20 years is the range. And this judge he can do whatever he wants.
Bree telling us here, to Nico's point earlier, that the statute of limitations has run out on these crimes, which means he wouldn't be able to be charged on a state level. But let me just give you guys some color from the courtroom. When Sean Combs entered the courtroom to await hearing the verdict, he took a seat next to his lawyers and briefly smiled towards his family. As he's done on other days, he made the praying hands gesture as he walked to a seat. He was wearing a light colored sweater over a collared shirt, which is essentially what he's been wearing the whole time. The back of his shirt was slightly untucked. So his mom forgot to tell him to tuck in his shirt on his big day. Mimi here says, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave him 3 years and the rest probation. Of course, if you're just joining us now, Sean Diddy Combs acquitted of the two most serious charges, the RICO and the sex trafficking, but he was convicted on the lesser, the transportation with prostitution charges. So he was convicted on the two lesser, the transportation to engage in prostitution, those two lesser charges. And now the defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, is making the case to allow him out on bail. Now, when the verdict was read, and after that, when the court was adjourned, Sean Combs got down from his chair and kneeled on the floor, appearing to pray. Some of his lawyers hugged each other, and a massive round of applause and cheers broke out in the gallery. Applause and cheers after that Cassie video circulated in the freak-offs. So I'm talking about, I think this guy is going to actually, I think maybe his stock is going to rise incredibly after this, which is just a disgusting thought. And Nico dropped his phone there. Marshals then escorted him out of the room and back into the holding cell. So Tim, let me ask you this. So what happens right now? It's 11:08 Eastern. They're coming back at 1 p.m., which is less than 2 hours. What's happening right now?
Well, the judge might be in the chambers having his clerks do a preliminary guideline application, see what the guidelines look like, reviewing the evidence, listening to the arguments, thinking what he thinks, maybe talking to probation, pretrial services, if they think he's a risk of flight. And he's going to have to make a public decision whether he gets out. And it's not going to be favorable to both sides. One, if he lets him out, then the prosecution's going to be mad, and it's a thumb in the face of justice. And if he stays in, then all the family's going to be upset. They're going to say this judge. It's a hard situation, and these are the kind of things judges earn their pay. And luckily, hopefully, this judge is a seasoned judge, and he's not going to be worried. And that's why judges get federal appointments for life, because you don't want them subject to the whim of reelection. They got to make decisions, and you hope they do it for the best of justice. And we'll see. Do we know much about this judge?
He's new to the bench, a year or two, and we have a former SDNY federal prosecutor here, Kristy Greenberg. Kristy, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. So great to have you. Meet Tim Jansen, another former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney out of Tallahassee. But Kristy, obvious first question, your reaction to this mixed verdict with the two most serious charges Diddy being acquitted on?
Okay, so taking it step by step, the prosecutors had a very strong case on the two where they got a guilty count, the transportation for prostitution. He was always cooked on those counts, right? All they had to show is he transported with the women and the escorts across state lines for prostitution. Consent is not a defense to that, so that was pretty cut and dry. I'm not surprised by the verdict on those two counts. I'm also not surprised at the not guilty count with respect to sex trafficking of Jane. I thought their case with Jane was weak. There was one incident. All you have to do is show one incident to prove sex trafficking. And they had one incident where he had used violence, I think convincingly, to cause her to engage in a freak off. But that one incident happened in California, and the incidents that they pointed to in New York didn't involve violence. They involved a theory of fraud that I think was a little tortured. The theory being that she would have been okay with doing the freak offs had she essentially gotten more quality time in their relationship, had she gotten more things, more trips, more, as she put it, Instagram post worthy, moments. And that I've charged sex trafficking based on fraud before, and that's not really what that looks like. Usually it's, you have people who think they're in a relationship and all of a sudden they're then forced into sex trafficking and they had no idea that that was going to happen. And that wasn't this. And then the theory of coercion with respect to Jane was that he was threatening her to not pay her rent. But he doesn't have to pay her rent. He can break up with her. He can also say, look, this is kind of what I like sexually. And if you don't like it, we don't have to be in a relationship. I also don't have to pay $10,000 a month for your rent. Like, that is not a threat of coercion. That is not a threat of financial harm to withhold paying rent. That's a threat of financial harm. I thought was much more convincing with respect to Cassie, where it's like, hey, I'm going to ruin you in this industry. I'm going to make sure nobody ever works with you again. Like, that's financial harm. Not paying rent, that's a gift. So I didn't think their coercion and their fraud theories with respect to Jane were very convincing. Again, and the violence that I thought was convincing didn't happen in the Southern District of New York. I will say I am very surprised by the not guilty counts, a verdict with respect to the sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and the RICO count. The sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura.
Guys, I'm sorry, Kristy. Let's listen in here. This is Doug Wigdor, Cassie's attorney.
Cassie's brought to light everything that has happened in this trial. I just spoke with her and with the U.S. Attorney's Office team, and she's in a good place. She's pleased that, again, that the jury has found him guilty of two federal crimes.
And we should point out that Cassie Ventura was awarded a $20 million
That was Doug Wigdor, and the anchor there was saying that it is true that Cassie Ventura was awarded $20 million in a civil lawsuit. That doesn't take away from the fact that she was beaten and abused by him. But Kristy, pick that up. You were saying that you're surprised on the Cassie count that it was an acquittal.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's this idea, and I guess the jury bought it, that, well, you've got all these messages where she is saying that she wants it. But he expected that he said to her, there's a message backwards, like, you need to seduce me. Like, these were messages he expected her to send. And so again, if all you have to do is prove one incident to prove sex trafficking, we saw it. We all saw the video. This is not like, believe your eyes. Like, this was him, again, beating her, dragging her by the hair. If you ask the question, why didn't she leave? We saw what happened when she tried to leave a freak off. He dragged her by the hair to try and bring her back. This idea that, oh, it was about a phone and he was trying to, get her to come back because he wanted his phone. That was her phone. The other witness there, the security guard, said she wanted her phone back. So their whole kind of effort to basically say this was just domestic violence, this had nothing to do with him being violent towards her, to get her to keep going with the freak off. The escort's still in the hotel room. It's not like they told him, hey, we're having a dispute amongst us, you can leave, here's your money, go. No, he's in a towel. He wants to keep going. Again, I thought that was very clear to anybody who watched the video and heard the testimony of both Cassie and the guard who were there. And then there were other incidents. There were multiple other incidents that she testified to, which again, the jury just clearly didn't believe her. I mean, the one was the flight from hell, where she's on this flight, a 9-hour flight from France to New York. He's showing her freak off videos on a commercial flight, by the way. So there are people around. He's showing her these freak off videos, and he's threatening to release them if she doesn't do a freak off. They get off the plane in New York City. He tells her he wants to do a freak off. She said, okay, because I don't want you to release these videos and embarrass me. That's textbook coercion. So clearly the jury just didn't believe her. And to that, I say, this is really showing you the backlash against the Me Too movement. I'm not saying believe all women. Again, I thought some of Jane's testimony there didn't quite hold up for sex trafficking. I thought she was clearly abused and they had an emotionally manipulative relationship. It didn't seem to me it was quite sex trafficking. But you have to listen to all women. And if you listened to Cassie and you saw how corroborated she was by video, by what you could see, and by all of the other witnesses, by the fact that he extorted her parents, by these other witnesses, the personal assistants who witnessed him be violent to her, her friends, personal assistants, like, it was so overwhelming with respect to her that the idea that the jury didn't believe her and found her not just a hung jury on that count, but not guilty. That just shows you, like, there is a real backlash to the Me Too movement at this point in this country.
Yeah, interesting. And by the way, these are live. Thank you for that. These are live pictures outside the courthouse. It's not over yet today. At 1 o'clock, they're coming back to decide whether or not Sean Diddy Combs will be released pending sentencing. Tim Jansen. Well, before I get there, Doug Wigdor, who is Cassie Ventura's attorney, that's the guy you just saw a few moments ago here. But he released an official statement saying, this entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November 2023. Although the jury did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking Cassie beyond a reasonable doubt, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. Cassie Ventura, left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. We must repeat with no reservation that we believe and support our client, who showed exemplary courage throughout this trial. He goes on and on. But Tim, at the end of the day, any which way you slice it, this is really a win for Sean Diddy Combs and a loss for the government. What went wrong?
Well, I didn't see the government's arguments. I agree. I thought Cassie was the stronger of the two victims in this case. And that's why they put her on the stand first. They led with her in this case. that beating, I don't know how any jury or any jurors can look at the beating she took and not see that there was physical force, and that if she didn't partake in this, it was going to happen again. It's disturbing that he was never charged in the state. Whoever didn't charge him in the state should be fired or removed from office. And I agree. I think this person is despicable, and the lawyer got him off whatever he said. Um, and I think the judge can still consider, he will, as you know, relevant conduct. The judge is still going to consider that activity when sentencing him, and he should, because that's horrible, and that was in a public place. The other prostitute was in the room. He was dragging her back to do a freak off. If that's not coercion by force, I don't know what would be.
Yeah. Kristy, let me come back to you. I mean, why didn't they charge him with the DV type charges? Why didn't they do that? Because that seemed to be such low hanging fruit.
So Southern District of New York, that the domestic violence is not a federal crime, so they couldn't charge him with that. Why the state prosecutors didn't charge him with domestic violence in California? Well, at the time, we heard Cassie say that police went to her door after the incident. She wouldn't speak to them. She wouldn't give, I think she gave them a very brief statement, but she would not name who did it. And when the victims aren't cooperative and they're not, I mean, it becomes a he said, she said at some point, though here, again, you have the video. So arguably you didn't necessarily even need her testimony when you have it on tape. But those cases as a general matter can be tougher when the victim is not cooperative. And sometimes prosecutors have to drop those cases even when victims initially make a complaint and then they refuse to go through with it and testify. You see that often in domestic violence cases. But again, I come back to, I don't know that you really need her. You have it on video. So I suspect that what was going on there is that video never made its way to the police, that the hotel, I mean, part of the reason there's a $10 million settlement with Cassie Ventura from the Intercontinental Hotel, I suspect, is the fact that they didn't call the police. I mean, not only didn't they call the police, because again, she said she didn't want them to, but at some point it's not really about what she wants. This happened at your hotel. They didn't even kick him out. They gave him a late checkout time. They told him, you make sure you check out by 3 p.m. And it's like, I mean, talk about not taking something seriously. And by the way, if that were anybody else, any Joe Schmo, would that be what happened? Of course not. No. This is because it's Sean Combs and because he's, rich and famous. And it just goes to show you that, power will get you far. And that's why I suspect, nothing happened as a result of that. That plus, even the arson with Kid Cudi's car. There was a lot he wasn't charged with here that he could have been charged with in the state. So it's disappointing for sure.
No, do I have to watch my language on this podcast?
Not really, but you're a religious man, so yeah. Go ahead.
It's just a shitty prosecutor in California. I mean, it just is, because many times when we were prosecuting cases, you can file a writ of attachment and make the victim show up to court. But as your guest, and I'm sorry I didn't get your name, what your guest was saying.
Nico, this is Kristy Greenberg, who was a former federal prosecutor in the SDNY.
Oh, hey, Kristy, pleasure to meet you.
And Nico, by the way, is former DA in Bexar County, Texas, which is San Antonio.
Thank you. And so we can do a writ of attachment. And so, and as she said before, you have it on video. You can go to the hotel. You can find out who checked out that room. You can make those connections and ties. I think the celebrity factor played more in California than anywhere else, to your point, Kristy. And they didn't prosecute because they could have prosecuted that case. There's no objective legal reason why they shouldn't have prosecuted that case on a domestic violence standard.
Yeah, real quick. Obviously, Judge Arun Subramanian, he thanked the jurors and then dismissed them, so they're out of there. But they are coming back. The judge asked for briefs from the government and the defense on release pending sentencing. So, Kristy, I asked Tim Jansen this, but what is going on in the courtroom right now between 11:23 a.m. and soon to be 1 p.m. Eastern? What are they doing? What are they scrambling to do? This is the scene, of course, outside the federal courthouse, courtesy of WABC Eyewitness News in New York City. What's happening inside behind the doors, Kristy, right now?
Well, you've got both sides putting together their papers to get to the court. The prosecutors, if they're saying that they're seeking the maximum is 20 years in prison. That is what they said they are seeking. So they are going to argue to the judge that he should continue to be detained, that based on the 2 counts that he was found guilty of. By the way, the standard for keeping him in right now is he a danger to the community? The judge has sat through this trial, 6 weeks or so of trial. If you don't come away from this trial thinking this man is a danger to the community, I don't know what you were watching. He is extremely dangerous. Regardless of you don't have to even put aside the verdict, because the judge for these matters can consider everything. He doesn't just have to consider the verdict. He can consider everything that he's heard. And so, all of the conduct that he's heard about, the arsons, the kidnapping, the beatings, all of that is relevant to whether or not he is a danger to the community. So I expect he will continue to be detained, because ultimately, even though these counts are less serious, they still carry a prison sentence. And I've seen this count where defendants are just convicted of this count and they go to jail for several years. Now, we're not talking about 15 years mandatory minimum like we were with the sex trafficking count, but we're still looking at years in prison. So I don't think he will be released by this judge. This judge is incredibly thoughtful and very deliberate. And I think he will make the right call. That said, look for the defense to come in and say the jury spoke loud and clear. They didn't buy what they heard from these witnesses. They didn't believe it. And you, judge, shouldn't either. And they're going to really spin this as though the judge should be deferential to the jury. But that's just not obviously the judge has to respect the jury's verdict, but the judge needs to make his determination. He is the one who decides a sentence. He is the one who decides detention, and he should decide it based on everything he's heard. And everything he's heard should lead to the only conclusion that he should be detained pending sentencing.
And Kristy, you're the one female on the panel, and you got 3 guys here. Let me ask you this. What do you think's going on with Cassie and Jane? This has got to be devastating to them. And not only that, it's got to be scary. And it's got to be scary for a lot of these witnesses. What are your thoughts?
You had Cassie, who was testifying about such deeply personal personal incidents. She testified, not to get too graphic, she testified about a rape. She testified about a time where she was intimate with Combs and she got a FaceTime from her now husband. That's the kind of detail that I can't imagine it's easy to have that conversation with your husband now when you're testifying to that in open court. It's bad enough. Presumably he knew that was coming, but it's bad enough to have that be a private conversation, to have the entire public now hear that. She really, the idea that anybody would think she was lying when she's saying things that are, I think, so personally hard to say and could really affect her relationships. And she did all of it while 8 months pregnant. She gave birth, I think, a week and a half after she finished her testimony, to do all of that while heavily pregnant, and with, I think, the grace that she did. This wasn't a witness with an axe to grind, right? And this wasn't a witness with an incentive to get paid. She already got her money. She didn't make a penny from testifying here. So this was somebody who continued to say that she still had feelings for him, that she looked back on their time together lovingly. So I think for her to go through this 4 days, and it was such a grueling process, and then to have the jury come back and say, we don't believe you, We don't believe that anybody forced or coerced you. We believe you wanted to be there, that you were thrilled to have, sex with a UTI, sex while on your period, have somebody pee on you. You were thrilled to have all of that happen. I mean, it's a sad day. And I think, unfortunately, what it does as a bigger impact is send a message to other victims that this is what happens when you come forward, that you may not be believed, that even if you are caught, the whole thing is caught on video. Even if we can see it, we still may not believe you if the person who's doing it to you is powerful enough. And, I have to, not only think about how hard this must be for Cassie, but also how hard this must be for other victims in deciding whether to come forward. It seems like, there's all of the incentives, all of the reasons that victims have for why they may not want to come forward are amplified by a verdict like this one.
Yeah. By the way, if you're just joining us, a mixed verdict. Sean Diddy Combs acquitted of the two most serious charges, the racketeering and sex trafficking, but convicted on the transportation and prostitution charges. So he does still face some substantial time, and that is what's going on now. The court is going to reconvene at 1:00 to try to figure out how to handle that. If you're new to Surviving the Survivor, and we have tons of new people in here, we host a nightly show every Monday through Thursday, usually at 5 or 7, and then Friday afternoons with the best guests, as you're seeing right now in all of true crime, talking about trending criminal cases. So please hit that like button. Please subscribe. And there's a Patreon page to support the channel. So Tim Jansen, there's a question earlier, a very good one. There is an attorney named Tony Busby, a personal injury attorney, not far from RICO in Houston, who's got like 120 people lined up. How does this affect or impact the civil suits? Does it?
Well, it doesn't really. Remember, the standard, the evidence that has to be proven in a civil case is much less than in a criminal case. A lot of time, criminal cases, federal cases, and state cases, it depends on the jurisdiction you're in, because the jury, like OJ, when they moved OJ's trial from Brentwood to LA, that was a big win for OJ. Trying this case in New York was a big win for Sean Diddy Combs. And those civil cases, wherever they're brought, it depends on the jurisdiction. Now, we're sitting here thinking, what's this judge going to do? Well, we need to know more about this judge. He was appointed, I take it, by Biden. Was he a former prosecutor? Was he a white-collar lawyer or a political person that got appointed? That's going to make a big decision on him when he sentences and whether he gives bond. Okay? Kristy probably knows this judge's background. I'd rather it have been a seasoned judge who's been on the bench and would have seen this conduct for what it is and realize how serious this is and how dangerous, versus someone who just got on the bench, who's been on it for maybe 2 years and it may be subject to the whim of public pressure.
Yeah.
So
Tim,
those all weigh in. Those all weigh in that the decisions on sentencing and bond.
I'm getting word that Steve Cohen, the magician behind the scenes, is getting us momentarily Sharay Hayes, otherwise known as the Punisher. He is one of the escorts, so he's going to be joining us in a moment. So get your questions ready for the Punisher. And Steve Cohen is great. And Sharay has a book out, by the way, and it's called, this is a true title, it's In Search of Freezer Meats, and I believe it is MEATS. We'll ask him what that title means. And thank you to Robin Ray here. A lot of new people coming in. For all the new people joining us, hands down the best guest conversations, all of true crime, and welcome. Thank you. Nico, you're a religious guy. One of the things that struck me is this guy physically struck multiple women, was doing some of the most abominable things that I don't think the man upstairs would condone. And yet when this came back, they said he was on his knees in the courtroom praying. Obviously, there's such a thing as redemption and, rehabilitation. What do you make of this, that he's on his knees praying in the courtroom hearing this? Is it genuine, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I witnessed the execution of my brother's murderer, and they asked me the same question, and I said, that's between him and the Lord. I don't know. What I do know as a man of faith, as a Christian, you know, Paul was Saul and he was a murderer and then gave his life to the Lord. Obviously had an interaction with Christ, and then he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. So I don't know if Diddy's kneeling and was it show, was it genuine? Time will tell. My pop always taught me that talk is cheap, actions speak louder than words, and it's in the book of James as well. But so I don't know. I mean, I hope it is. I mean, it doesn't absolve him of what he did. There's still accountability. I mean, he still needs to be held accountable. He can be forgiven and restored, but still be held accountable and should serve his time. I mean, the thieves on the cross, we're still held accountable. The one on the left asked for forgiveness and acknowledged Christ, and he was still executed. I mean, so he should be held accountable. So there are kind of two issues for me. There's accountability, which is a biblical principle, a metered justice, and then there's redemption. They're separate. They're two different things. So I hope he's sincere about it. But I mean, who knows? Time will tell.
Yeah. Kristy, to you, and I can see Sharay in the background. We're about to get him on. I know the COE is working to connect him and get him all good. Real quickly, it's not a surprise here because I saw this firsthand when I was in the courtroom the first week. There are a lot of Diddy supporters, and they were cheering Free Puff today. Kristy, do you think there was any sort of, the quote unquote sanctity of the jury is sacrosanct in this country, but you think there was any potential jury nullification from the get-go, that there were fans, maybe people who are starstruck? Is that a problem on a case like this?
Yes, it is definitely a problem in a case like this. We can't know, obviously, for certain what happened here, but I would note a number of the jurors indicated as among their interests 90s hip hop, and they actually had to screen out a number of people who were very familiar with Combs, with his show Making the Band. One juror, the prosecutor said they struck because she knew not only from his show all of the kids, all of their names, and felt that that there might be some bias in his favor. So that could certainly, that's always a concern that you're going to find. But the concern is really you'd find one person maybe who's going to hang the jury. Here, everybody, they were unanimous finding not guilty on sex trafficking, Cassie Ventura, and on that RICO count, as well as for Jane. So when you have the entire jury finding a not guilty verdict, then it really becomes less of, because not a lot of people in that jury had not any familiarity with Sean Combs. So they were convinced as well. So that signals a larger problem and not necessarily a bias coming in, because it's not all of them who had a bias coming in, even if some of them did.
Yeah, we're joined now by Sharay Hayes, otherwise known as the Punisher, one of the male escorts. She testified at this trial. Sharay, thank you so much for being here. You're joined by Tim Jansen, a former federal prosecutor, Kristy Greenberg, a former federal prosecutor in the SDNY, Nico LaHood, a former district attorney in San Antonio, Bexar County, Texas. We don't mess around on this show, Sharay. We got the best guests in all true crime. But obvious first question, your reaction to the mixed verdict today?
It was actually the verdict I was expecting. And I do pay attention to the case, and I do understand that specific to the law itself, especially when prosecutors said that you only needed one instance for a guilty verdict, I assumed that he would have been found guilty. But I think if you're not following it by the letter of the law, the fact that this was a 10-year relationship and there were just multiple examples of text messages of love and multiple examples that could have seemed consented, I always thought it was going to be hard for a jury or just a normal person to see this outside of a normal relationship with maybe some toxic domestic violence elements. But when you cross over to what is considered sex trafficking and you understand that this is his longtime girlfriend, I think a person separating that to look at it specifically of just the nuances of the law was going to be difficult.
Yeah. Sharay, I know you have a book out, and I want to definitely address that. It's called In Search of Freezer Meats. Can you just tell us what that's a very interesting title, I have to say. What's the book about?
It's a self-help book for men. It's pretty much based on as men, as we age and we start developing issues with our sexuality, which then leads to confidence issues and masculinity issues. So it was always something that was supposed to be centered around helping men regain motivation and stuff, especially primarily with our sex lives and stuff like that. It's something that we all go through at times. Obviously, it came up in the trial because I've referenced part of my situation with Mr. Combs and Mr. Ventura as an anxiety space that caused me issues. So it was an example of a self-help scenario that spilled into my testimony.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to spend some time here with Sharay, so I hope Nico, Tim, and Kristy are okay with that, and then we'll go back around the horn. If anyone has to go, except Sharay, you can, I don't want you to, but stick around for a little bit. And by the way, 12:30 in about 50 minutes, we're switching over a huge hearing in Boise, Idaho with Brian Koberger. But Sharay, this is a guy with tremendous reach, Sean Diddy Combs. You were inside that, inner circle in a way. You got to meet him firsthand, see how all these people operate. Is there any fear or trepidation? I've seen your ripped abs, but this is a guy that has a far reach and a lot of power. Are you scared at all today with this verdict?
Well, so honestly, if I had any fear associated, it would be with a guilty verdict. Obviously, I testified for the prosecution, so if my testimony was believed to be a pure contribution to a guilty verdict, is something that if I'm being completely honest, that I had some reservations about. When you hear he wasn't granted bail because of a possibility of intimidation and these type of things, you have to consider that as a space of worry. But all I can do is, in regards to testifying the facts, and try to do it as without any bias as possible. I just have to hope that's okay. But when you hear someone doesn't get bail because of possible scenarios like this, it's obviously something you have to worry about in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask you a question that could get you in trouble too. Feel free not to answer it. But, and I'm going to ask you about Cassie next. But do you believe Sean Diddy Combs is for lack of a better phrase, an evil human being? The way he operates, people say that he is the devil. We've heard some of his security say that. It seems like he has a very depraved mind. How would you characterize Sean Diddy Combs?
So in these scenarios, I try to just base it on my interaction. And the truth of the matter is, like I testified to, I did not see anything. What my experience was a normal couple that had some very racy sexual things that they enjoyed. And all my interactions seemed consented and seemed like this was just something that they did for their own personal enjoyment. I don't want to have a strong opinion about parts of his character that I never personally witnessed. Obviously, if the rumors and the interpretations of the way that it's put out there is true, then you're going to think anybody with those characteristics are a difficult person. But I just didn't experience it to broadcast a strong opinion like that.
Yeah, and I believe that I know Daniel Phillip, the first person to testify, had some strong feelings for Cassie. You knew Cassie really well. How do you think she's taking this today?
I mean, my honest opinion is I believe that if this wasn't federal charges in a court scenario, I would have think Cassie wouldn't have wanted to be in court at all. We understand she filed a civil suit initially, not a criminal suit, so she didn't pursue necessarily criminal charges. I think what she was exposed to and what she had to go through to be a part of this in terms of the public spectacle she had to experience, I think it's something she probably would have avoided. So I could believe there's some disappointment after going through all of that public transparency of these deep things that she went through. I'm sure there's disappointment with the verdict, but just in my small experience of participation, embarrassment, and judgment, and the stuff that happens being associated with it. Hers is just on such a higher level to her personal life. And as a woman, I'm sure it's a difficult space for her to now move forward from.
And have you spoken or had any contact with her in recent years, months, days?
I have not. I have not had any contact with either party since the last encounter, which was sometime in the spring of 2015.
And how about her husband, Alex Fine? Did you know Alex? I saw him. I was at the courthouse for the first week of this trial, and I got to say, he didn't look broken. He looked really upset, really intense and angry, like he wanted to literally fight Sean Combs. That was the vibe he was giving off. Did you know Alex? Any idea how he might be handling this?
I don't know him personally. I never met him. I'm just going to go with the assumption of any man, right? You know, that's his wife. So as men, we're protectors, right? So I'm sure he sees his wife in this very difficult situation, and she's on this stand and she's under the scrutiny and she's going through reliving all this trauma. So I'm sure just his nature being helpless, that he couldn't protect her and help her in those moments, was probably difficult for him to get through.
Yeah. By the way, I was an investigative reporter at Fox 5 in New York City. I'm from Jersey, and I love Sharay's that New York accent is bringing me home. He's got that little tinge of New York in him. Is Sharay? Here's a question from the audience from Samantha. Is Sharay still in the adult entertainment business after this all happened? What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm still in the adult entertainment business, but it's the base of what I was hiring. I'm partners in a company called Hunkomania. We do bachelorette celebrations for ladies getting married. That's always been my main thing. I have to own that I delved into the male prostitution, male escort scenario as I took a proposition and I engaged in it. But my business has always been just a typical bachelorette girls' night out parties and nightclubs around the United States.
Yeah. Thanks again for joining us, Kristy. Can you stick around for a few more minutes, Sharay?
Sure. I got about another 10 I can work with.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you being here. Again, this is Sharay Hayes, otherwise known as the Punisher, one of the escorts who testified in the Sean Diddy Combs case. And he's got a book out, and I'm looking for the title, In Search of Freezer Meats, about what happens to men when they hit a certain age. And as a 50-year-old guy, I can tell you, none of that is happening. Age catches up with you, except not with Nico LaHood, man. He's too cool. Kristy, to you, someone said this sets a really bad precedent in general. Well, we're joined by John Day, another criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, but and John, I'll get to you in a second, but Kristy, to you, what kind of precedent does this set for other people who have been through these domestic violence situations and are now going to see this fall through for Cassie, albeit the specific charges were different, but they're going to see Cassie as someone who was a DV victim and that she quote unquote lost. People are already afraid to speak out. Do you think it's going to make it harder? I know it's not a legal question, but do you think it's going to make it harder for some people who are on the fence to come forward now?
Absolutely. It is always, I prosecuted sex trafficking cases for many years. I supervised sex trafficking cases. And one of the hardest parts about those cases as a prosecutor is sitting down with the victims and convincing them to come forward. And, a lot of times prosecutors are not doing that alone. They're not having those conversations alone. Usually, the first step is making sure that those victims have their own legal representation to the extent that they have any criminal exposure, right? So, even by coming forward and saying we engaged in prostitution, they could then find themselves with an overzealous prosecutor who looks to prosecute them for that, even though the circumstances of them doing so may have been forced or coerced. And in fact, they really, should not be prosecuted and they should be treated as victims. So that's one worry that they may have. And you want to make sure they have a good lawyer who's looking out for their best interest, because as the prosecutor, you're not their lawyer. That's number one. Number two, you also, so many victims in these situations have had all kinds of issues as a result. Both victims talked about, in this case, talked about having deep depression, being despondent. Cassie talked about a suicide attempt, which was one of the most difficult moments of this trial to listen to, where she at that point had already been married. She already had 2 children. And she said, I just want to walk out the front door and walk into traffic. This was years after it had happened. The idea of that post-traumatic stress, that she couldn't really move forward because of the trauma that she had, that's very real. So making sure that you're working with victim witness specialists who can work to make sure that the victims are getting the help that they need, that they, whether it's housing, whether it's therapy, whatever it may be, to make sure that they're stabilized and in a position where they can then get up on the stand and even testify. And then, also just, right, like this idea of, will they believe me? And if they, what will the public think of me if I'm saying these things? Will they, there were so many people in this courthouse, again, who were Diddy fans, and the way that they talked about these victims was, frankly, really disturbing and really callous. Of course they wanted it. And it was just, it was really gross. And so you have to worry about that as well, your reputational hit from doing this. And you also have to worry about the fear. Many victims are afraid of their, whether it's their sex traffickers or abusers, whatever the circumstances may be, they are afraid. They are afraid for themselves. They were afraid for their family members. And so this idea that, to get them to testify and to be able to convince them, hey, you're doing a service to all of the other people this person could victimize after you. You are doing something really not just for yourself, that it's powerful to be able to testify and speak your truth and have him have to sit there and listen to you. There is power in that, but you are also protecting others who could come forward, who could have this happen to them as well. And so that is, again, when you're dealing with so much from the abuse, it's really hard to show victims that there's an incentive, that it's worth it for them to do it, that the pros outweigh the cons. And especially when you see something like what happened here today, again, with respect to Cassie in particular, and the fact that it's on video, most cases where there is domestic violence or sex trafficking, you don't have it on video, you can't see it. So the fact that there was that powerful video here and the jury still said unanimously, no, we don't believe her, that's going to give pause to a lot of victims going forward, unfortunately.
100% agree with you on that. Sharay just has a few more minutes, and I'm going to get to John Day after that. Sharay what testified in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. He has a book out now, In Search of Freezer Meats, and was an escort, one of the escorts. So Sharay, a couple of real quick questions, and then we'll let you go. Now Sean Combs faces up to 20 years in prison, which is what the government is asking for, and already Mark Agnifilo asked for him to be released. Should he be released, do you think? And how much time do you think he should serve?
Yeah, so what I would say is, I'm sure there's the charge up with the engaging in transportation for prostitution probably has a long window of what that is going to be defined as. And if you're going to say that his girlfriend was not sex trafficked, right? If all of this was a consenting scenario and this is just a first offense in regards to hiring prostitution based on his record, I can't really see that amounting to a long length of sentence. Prostitution, regardless of illegal, is something that goes on rampantly throughout our society. So any type of long sentence in regards to that just being a conviction without anything else to any person would probably not be lengthy. So I would not be surprised if I heard time served.
What about a future in hip hop? You think there's a DJ speaking out, a hip hop DJ, who says that Sean Diddy Combs likely will be back on the scene. Do you think he will be?
So, yeah, honestly, I do feel like in this society that there's a short memory. There's a short memory. We've seen other celebrities involved in really, really difficult crimes and of abuse and domestic violence and stuff like that make a hit record, and all of a sudden it's forgot about. So I think if he implements himself and, you know, makes good products and good music and stuff like that, he probably can put this behind him.
Yeah. Final question. We all have them, but do you have any regrets specific to this, to your role in this? Your final thoughts?
Yeah, my regret is I do have empathy for Miss Ventura as a victim. So even though I didn't firsthand witness or experience any what I thought was abuse, if my interaction, if my participation was a place of distress for her and caused any of that for her, I do have regret in regards to just her personal experience.
Huge thanks to Sharay, the Punisher Hayes, who testified in this trial and was an escort for Sean Diddy Combs and Cassie Ventura. Really appreciate it. Best of luck with your book and best of luck in life, Sharay. You sound like a good guy and got caught up in a mess here. So I hope things get easier from here on out.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. John Day. He is a Santa Fe-based criminal defense attorney. Just your initial reaction, Sean Diddy Combs acquitted on the most serious charges, and you just heard one of the witnesses from the actual trial say that he thinks it could be as simple as time served now. I don't know if that's going to hold water necessarily, but your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joel. You know, taking off on something that Kristy said about victims, I mean, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Remember what just happened in the Weinstein trial. The jury didn't buy everybody's testimony. And you had the same situation here. We don't know, obviously, the details. No one's talked to these jurors, which is going to be fascinating if somebody is willing to talk about the deliberations. But and I do a lot of victim representation as a lawyer, and I was a prosecutor who did a lot of sex cases. And, you know, Kristy's point is exactly right. This is going to be it's going to put up a wall between victims of sex crimes and the prosecution of those crimes, unfortunately, because if you've seen what the women went through, I mean, you're going to put yourself through that, or are you just going to say, you know what, I can't do it. I mean, it takes a really strong victim to get up on the stand and do that. And it's one of the worst experiences of their lives. At least that's what they tell me. But to see a verdict like that after so much testimony, it was a tsunami of evidence that the prosecution presented. And the jurors, for whatever reason, didn't buy it. They didn't buy the one victim in the Weinstein trial. So I don't know if this is something that's prevalent now, but it's not happening in a vacuum. We're seeing this happen over and over again.
Yeah. We're joined now. And this is why Steve Cohen gets paid the big bucks. He's got a $350 million deal over 3 years here at STS for bringing in the best guests. Mitchell Epner served as an assistant United States attorney for the District of New Jersey. He successfully prosecuted more than 150 cases, including numerous trial victories. He remains involved with NGOs, non-government organizations fighting against sex trafficking domestically and internationally. Mitchell, this is a loss in that world. Do you think?
So this is a huge victory for Sean Combs and his trial team, and it is a huge loss for the prosecution. And I know Mark Agnifilo quite well. We served together in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of New Jersey. And he deserves all of the kudos today because he quarterbacked a successful defense. And this is a successful defense in a case.
Just lost Mitchell's. Mitchell, we just lost your audio. I'm going to bounce you out for 1 second, and we'll get that fixed. John, I put the wrong thing here. John Day. Do you agree with him right there? He just said that this is a tremendous, loss for the government, and they don't lose. 99, somewhere between a 98 and 99% conviction rate. Diddy is a 1%er financially, and now a 1%er. He was convicted on the lesser charges, but really a 1%er when it comes to all of this.
Yeah, I mean, just objectively, you've got to give credit to this defense team. I mean, they had an incredibly difficult job, whether you're happy with the outcome or not. Technically, and as a defense lawyer, you have to realize that what they did was phenomenal. Mm-hmm.
Which,
course,
by
like I
the
said-
way, John, they did without calling a single defense witness.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, nobody testified. They were able to convince these jurors from the outset, I guess, that that they ought to be skeptical. And the government, I thought going into last night that the government prosecutors ought to be sleeping pretty well, at least on the other 4 counts. I was wrong. I mean, but you've got to give the defense team credit for pulling off an amazing victory. And I want to go back over this and see exactly what they did. I want to pick this apart just technically so I can learn from what these guys did.
Yeah, well, Mark Agnafilo is widely respected as one of the best, and now his stock is just going to skyrocket. And his wife, of course, is defending Luigi Mangione, the man accused of shooting and killing the CEO of United Healthcare in broad daylight. So there you go. We're trying to get Mitchell Epner back up, and while we do that, I'm just going to let's see if we've got him here. Hey, Mitchell.
Hey, I don't know where you lost me.
Yeah. Well, let me pick up with another question then. There's someone who just tweeted out that Diddy is the new generation's OJ. Do you agree with that?
No. The case against OJ Simpson was rejected because the prosecution put forward their case through Mark Furman, who was just not a trusted witness. And the question there was, did O.J. Simpson do it or was he framed? The question here was very different. The question here was, there was no doubt that the freak-offs happened. There was no doubt that sex workers were paid and who participated in these freak-offs. There was no question that the drugs were involved. What happened was largely not contested. What was contested was whether Sean Combs had Mia and Cassandra Ventura as victims or volunteers. It was undisputed that they started as volunteers. The prosecution's case was that they became victims who only continued to participate because they were coerced. One was a fundamental rejection of the justice system in the O.J. Simpson case. The jury just did not trust anything that the prosecution brought forward because they thought the evidence was tainted by Mark Furman. In this case, I don't think that the jury had to distrust any part of the prosecution, only the question of whether Cassandra Ventura and Mia were accurately testifying when they said they only continued to participate in the freak-offs because they were coerced. And it's even possible that jurors thought that they honestly believed that when they were testifying years later, but that wasn't the way they acted at the time. And that's where reasonable doubt could lie.
Yeah, interesting. And by the way, OJ, in my opinion, killed those two, and there was no murders here, so that's an obvious, massive difference. But Twitter is an amazing place. People are tweeting out. Imagine the celebratory freak off. So people have just crazy things to say on Twitter. Not a place you want to engage, but unfortunately for my business, I've got to be there way too often. John Day, to you. Already there are reports of two men fighting outside the courthouse, and they're fighting over Diddy guilty, Diddy's not guilty. This could divide, certainly, I don't want to say divide a nation because that's hyperbolic, but there's going to be tremendous debate over this, and you're a level-headed kind of guy. We asked Kristy about this earlier. People who are victims of DV might be more afraid to come forward now because Cassie Ventura basically spilled her entire guts, her entire personal story, and then was essentially rejected by these jurors. What's your advice to the public here they're going to be bifurcated and heated?
Yeah, I know. We've seen these, the supporters and the opponents. But the reality, when it comes down to ground level, when it comes to victims of domestic violence coming forward. Again, this was sort of a unique, this was a singular situation with the lifestyle and the music business. And you've got, you know, the government trying to apply RICO, which was designed for organized crime families, to Diddy's lifestyle and the music business. And did that translate? Well, not in this case, but the idea that, you know, what's disturbing or concerning if you do deal with victims is the general impact across the country. Because if there had been a conviction, imagine if there had been a conviction, 5 counts. Sure, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you see that as something that's reaffirming. You say, look, someone's going to listen to me. I will go forward with this. But I mean, I have cases right now where victims they're already scared about what's going to happen to them if they go into the courtroom. And this is not going to help.
Yeah, certainly not. Mitchell, to you, and I'll get back to Kristy, and then we're going to start to wind it down because we've got Brian Koberger coming up at 12:30, a huge hearing in Boise, Idaho today. But Mitchell, I asked this question of some of the guests earlier. Is there a 2-tier level of justice in this country for those who have a lot of money and those who do not?
I think, unfortunately, the answer to that is yes, because very few people could afford to put together the defense team that Sean Combs had. He had a team from Mark Agnifalo's firm. He had at least 3 other highly qualified trial attorneys. He had Alexandra Shapiro, who was handling the legal issues and the potential appeal issues. The amount of money that was spent on this defense is well into the 7 figures. I wouldn't be surprised if it reached the 8 figures. And there aren't 100 people on the planet who could afford to do that.
You know, I have to ask you, if it did reach the 8 figures, what's that money for? Because these guys literally didn't even put on an actual defense. I mean, I know they're cross-examining and they've got to do research, but what is that kind of money spent on?
So I'm glad you asked, because I used to be a prosecutor, but I'm now a criminal defense attorney. I've been doing this for over 30 years. The hard work at trial for a defense attorney in a criminal trial is done on cross-examination. In most cases, the defense does not put up many witnesses of their own. They sometimes put up none. In very few cases does the defendant actually testify. So to answer your question, where does that time go? In order to do an effective cross-examination of a defendant, as a defendant, we're talking about the paying attorneys, the lead attorneys, probably in excess of $1,000 an hour for hundreds of hours each month, running down every possible avenue for cross-examination so that they can find the 10, 15, 20 things they actually want to question on, and then preparing the actual cross-examination is shooting a movie while somebody else is trying to put on a movie with the exact opposite script. And that is very difficult to do. It's exacting. It requires extraordinary preparation. And you saw how that can be effective. The defense made their defense during the cross-examination of Cassandra, during their cross-examination of Mia, during their cross-examination of Jane. And I think we will never know whether the prosecution might have been able to get a sex trafficking conviction with regard to Cassandra Ventura if they hadn't have put on the rest of the case, the RICO case, the case with regard to Mia, the case with regard to Jane. We'll never know the answer to that. What we do know is that at the end of the day, the jurors rejected the fundamental proposition that the government had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that these women were victims. And that was done almost entirely on cross-examination.
Yeah. I think this comment is, thank you for that, Mitchell. I appreciate it. This comment, I think, is completely unfair. Diddy represents men in our country like it or not. No, they do not. Look at John Day. Look at Mitchell. Look at me. Most men, I believe, are good guys with good intentions. There are idiots on both sides of the gender aisle. Definitely more men than
Can I
women.
jump in? Can I jump in for one moment on
Yeah,
that?
please.
The one thing that I think the defense took a lot of criticism for, and I, before the jury came back, was questioning, was whether the opening argument by Tini Garagos, where they admitted the domestic violence, which they had to because it was on tape, and they admitted the drug use, which they had to because it was on videotape, and basically said, he's a bad guy. He's just not a RICO bad guy. I questioned whether that was too much to ask of a jury. And it wasn't. This jury made that dividing line. And that was very effective. But so I think even with Sean Combs being acquitted, responding to the comment you were just talking about, most men in the United States are not domestic abusers. Most men are not drug addicts. These are things Sean Combs admitted to. That's a dividing line. It's just the jury had an additional dividing line that while he was those bad things, he wasn't guilty of RICO or sex trafficking.
We're going to start to wrap this up here. So, and John Day, I apologize, you didn't get nearly as much time as I would like to have given you, but John Day is a criminal defense attorney, a former reporter, but he is out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Just your final thoughts here, John, before we wrap things up.
Yeah, I mean, can you buy justice in this country? I mean, as a defense lawyer and someone who watched another high-profile trial here in Santa Fe, which was Alec Baldwin's case, and some of Baldwin's team were defending Diddy in this case. It's an interesting question, but you know, you get what you pay for, I guess. And so if you can afford the best, you get some amazing lawyering. But there are a lot of people who are facing these issues on both sides who don't get that level of representation. But I think technically you have to say that the defense team they did what they had to do, and they were effective on cross-examination. And I think the prosecutors are wondering, what the hell happened?
Yeah, well, we're going to save the woman for last because they are better than men. So, Mitchell Epner, thank you for coming on, a first-time guest. I hope you'll come back. We do nightly shows on trending cases here. I'm going to leave it just open for you to comment however you'd like, in light of the fact that we got a split verdict here with Sean Diddy Combs acquitted on the most serious charges. Realistically, let me ask you, how much prison time does he serve realistically, and your final thoughts?
So under the federal sentencing guidelines, I did a quick calculation. I think that the sentencing range is going to start at 15 to 21 months. The government is going to argue that there should be upward adjustments based upon coercion, even though the jury failed to find beyond a reasonable doubt there was coercion. Under the sentencing guidelines, it only would have to be proved by preponderance of the evidence. The government is also going to say multiple counts lead to an upward adjustment. If you apply those upward adjustments, you're still looking at a sentencing range under the guidelines of about 36 months. I don't know. The defense is going to argue he should be sentenced to time served. And I don't know where that's going to come out, but I would be shocked if we're looking at anything beyond something in the range of about 3 years as an absolute maximum. And, you know, given the fact that when he woke up this morning, Sean Combs did not know whether he was going to ever step foot outside of jail again as long as he lived. That is an enormous victory for the defense.
Absolutely. Again, Mitchell Epner from 2001 to 2004 served as an assistant United States attorney for the District of New Jersey, which is my home state, the best state in the union, even though I live in Florida now. Mitchell, great to meet you. Sorry it's under these bizarre circumstances, but I hope that you will come back. And Kristy, Yeah. Kristy, you get the final word here. Just to kind of piggyback, and Kristy's been great. She sat through, I think, just about every day of this trial. But Kristy, sentencing, just explain. Most of us don't understand how this works. We're going to have this court resume at 1 about the bail hearing, but when will sentencing be? Walk us through that process and your final thoughts.
So I would expect at this hearing that's happening later this afternoon, the judge will decide whether he remains detained or is released on some kind of a bail package. And then at that point, a sentencing date will be set. In a typical criminal case in the Southern District of New York, that sentencing date is set about 3 months out. It allows for several things to happen. First of which is for the probation officer to be assigned, and that person is going to interview Sean Combs, likely in the presence of his counsel. They could interview other members of his family to get really a picture of who he is. His everything from his background. Obviously, we know a lot about him because he's a public figure, but you'll get his employment history, his medical history, and then there'll be the offense conduct, which both sides will submit their versions of that from the trial transcript to the probation officer. And then ultimately the probation officer will make a recommendation to the court about what sentence if the officer believes would be fair. Then you're going to have both sides submit their sentencing submissions. Again, presumably very different in terms of the sentence they will be asking for, considering that the prosecution already said they would be asking for 20 years, the maximum allowable. Expect the defense to be very much on the other side of that. And then it will be up to this judge to decide. This judge is new to the bench. Has about 2 years on the bench, but I found that, and he does not have experience as a criminal prosecutor. He's very very well respected as an attorney, a partner at a big law firm, but he does not have necessarily that criminal experience. That said, he ran a phenomenal trial here, incredibly fair to both sides, very thoughtful, very on the ball with his rulings on objections. So he's really, I think, going to be somebody who's going to think long and hard about what the right sentence is based on everything that he's heard. And, in addition to the jury's verdict, he also sat through this whole trial and is very familiar with the evidence and has a good sense of who Sean Combs is. And, my expectation would be that he's going to get a sentence of several years in prison. I don't think he will get 20 years in prison. I don't think the maximum is realistic here, but I do think he will get a sentence of several years in prison. And again, the question for today is to whether he's a danger to the community. That is the question, as to whether or not he's going to be released. I don't see how you could sit through this trial and not think that this man is a danger to the community. So I expect he will be detained through sentencing, but we shall see this afternoon.
Thank you. That was amazing. I had a hunch listening to Mitchell Epner that he's not your run-of-the-mill sort of guy. And I know Kristy Greenberg went to Harvard Law. Well, lo and behold, I looked it up just now. Mitchell Epner, Dartmouth College undergrad, Harvard Law School graduate. So, John Day, did you go to Harvard Law? You'd be the odd man out here.
Just the little undergrad program that they had. So
yeah. Well, there you go. Did you go to Harvard undergrad?
Yes.
Look, we have 3 Harvard grads. I'm the sole loser here. So I'm proud to be the dumb guy. But I had a feeling listening. I love listening to guys like Mitchell and John and a woman like Kristy, because they are amazingly smart, and they've got the right jobs because they're important jobs. So again, if you're just tuning in, we're about to tune out. But Sean Diddy Combs, he is the hip hop star worth nearly $1 billion, at least at one point, at least before this trial. Found guilty of 2 felony counts, but they are the lesser charges: the transportation to engage in prostitution under the Federal Mann Act. But he was acquitted of the 2 most serious charges: the RICO racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. And right now, in about 40 minutes, the judge is going to decide, does he go back to MDC Brooklyn? He asked Sean Combs that early this morning, and Sean Combs shook his head that he does not want to go back. It's going to be the judge's decision about what happens next. And then you heard Kristy break down the sentencing and Mitchell as well. So we're going to stay tuned when all that stuff happens. We'll bring it to you. But in about 12 minutes, we're pivoting over. Brian Koberger has a huge hearing. He's the guy accused of the murder of the 4 University of Idaho students. A plea deal has been reached. He will be in court. We're going to bring it to you live. Love you, America. Love you, Harvard Law. Love you, Harvard undergrad. Love you, Jersey. Love you, Santa Fe. Love you, Long Island, New York, and, of course, Manhattan. And still, justice for all those who are victims of DV. And we're thinking of you, Cassie, Jane, and Mia. And I think you got a mixed bag today. Probably not enough, but we're in your corner. Love you all. Guys, stick around 1 second if you can.